everybody, and welcome to our 5th Veggie RX video. Today we are going to be talking about benefits of vegetables in the other subgroup. We're also going to be talking about roasting your vegetables, what it is and how to do it, and we're going to leave you with some easy basic seasoning combinations so that you can roast your vegetables at home.
So you may ask, what type of vegetables make up the other vegetable subgroup? Well, some examples would include eggplant, mushrooms, onions, cucumbers, just to name a few. So this subgroup is not as easy to identify as our red-orange subgroup or our dark green vegetable subgroup. So you can always refer to your handout that was given in week 1 that will list some examples of those vegetables that make up the other subgroup. So what's great about our other vegetables is that they have many health benefits. So one of their health benefits is that they're extremely high in nutrients as well as water, making them very just naturally low in calories or energy. So they can be a really important part to incorporate into our diet just to help with maintaining a healthy weight. And when we have too many calorie dense foods or energy dense foods over time, this can increase our risk of gaining weight and lead to complications and conditions like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. So by incorporating the other vegetables into our diets, this can help with just balancing our overall meals and just helping with filling us up because they're really high in fiber, as well as supporting a healthy weight. So you can try using the My Plate method. And the plate method encourages us to fill half of our plate with vegetables. And you can also see it here on the My Native Plate visual. So by filling half of our plate with vegetables at each meal, this can help towards meeting our recommended day's value of 2 to 3 cups.
Yeah, so an easy way to prepare our vegetables to eat if we didn't want to eat them raw is to roast our vegetables. So what is roasting? Well, roasting is a cooking technique that uses the high heat of the oven to bring out the natural flavors of the vegetables through caramelization. And what is caramelization? Well, caramelization is the heating of the natural sugars in the vegetables that encourages and creates a browning effect and makes the vegetable to also be slightly crispy. This results in a nuttier taste and makes the vegetable more savory and flavorful. Now, since we're using the oven, you might wonder what the difference is between roasting and baking. Well, roasting actually uses a higher temperature of the oven, which is 400 degrees or higher, as where baking usually uses lower temps in the oven, around 325, 350. Another difference is that roasting also uses the vegetable in its more natural state. You can cook the vegetable by either just lightly slicing it into bite-sized pieces, or you can even roast the vegetable whole, as where with baking, you're using the vegetable more in a looser state. So an example of this would be, say you're making lasagna and you're using the vegetable in like a tomato sauce. So you're melding all of those vegetables together, as opposed to where roasting, you're really highlighting the vegetable by itself. And what's great is that with that, roasting does take a lot less time and work for preparing your vegetables to cook. There is very little prep, and it's great because you just prep it all together, throw it in the oven, and let the oven do all of the work.
Awesome, so let's get to roasting our vegetables. The first step is always preheating our oven. We're gonna set the oven to 425 degrees. While the oven's preheating, we're gonna get our 4 ingredients that we need ready to roast our vegetables. So that's gonna include the vegetable we're working with. Today, we are using a summer squash zucchini that we'll be roasting up. We're also gonna need a little bit of oil. We're using olive oil today, but you could also use another heart-healthy oil like canola or vegetable oil. And we also have a little bit of salt and pepper just to add some flavor to our vegetables. So once we have all of our ingredients ready to go, we can go ahead and start prepping our squash here. So today we're going to be cutting our squash into half moon size. So Diana's starting just by chopping off the ends here. And you can really cut up your squash or vegetable into whatever shape and size that you prefer. So you could do it into rounds, into bite-sized pieces. Maybe you want to do it into like matchstick kind of shape and size. But again, today we're going to be doing directly into half moons. So it's important when you're prepping your vegetables, getting them ready here, that we're cutting them all in the same size and shape, just so that they are able to roast and cook evenly. So it's definitely worth just taking that extra time to just be mindful of the shape and size you're cutting them in, and try to get them all uniform so they cook evenly. So you may have had like breakfast potatoes before, where some may be overcooked and some may be undercooked, just because they weren't cut all in the same size to begin with. So it definitely pays off if you can make sure they're all in that same size. The larger the size, the longer it will take to cook. So if you're in a time crunch, just by taking that time to cut them into smaller pieces, that will take less time in the oven. Great, so we have our zucchini ready to go here. So we're next gonna throw it into a mixing bowl. And you could also do this directly on the roasting pan too, if you don't want to use a mixing bowl. But we're gonna add in our other ingredients here. So we're adding in some oil. And then we have a spatula here, so you can just nicely coat the zucchini with the oil. And you really only need to use enough oil, again, just to coat the vegetables. And now we're adding in a little bit of salt for flavor. And feel free to, if you want to incorporate other vegetables while you're roasting, you can definitely do that. Just be mindful that some vegetables may take longer in the oven to cook and some may take less time. So just be aware of that. For those that take less time to cook, you would just add that towards the end of the roasting process. So once we have our vegetables nice and incorporated here, we're gonna evenly spread them out onto our pan. So we did lay out a piece of aluminum foil here. You can also use parchment paper. It just makes for a mess-free, easy cleanup. Wonderful. So they're ready to go and throw in the oven. And then when they're roasting in the oven, about halfway through the roasting time, you will want to give them just a nice toss to promote them to cooking nice and evenly.
Yeah, great. So in addition to the salt and pepper that we added to our vegetables prior to roasting, you can add additional flavor to your vegetables using herbs. And what's great is that you can either use fresh or dried herbs for adding that flavor to your roasted vegetables. And with fresh herbs, what's nice is that they're super easy. You can actually leave them whole and just nestle them in between your vegetables on the baking sheet. If you do want a more stronger flavor with your fresh herbs, I would recommend taking them off of the stem, chopping them up a little bit, and adding them to your vegetables when you're mixing them with the salt and pepper, just to incorporate that flavor more. If you want to use dried herbs as opposed to fresh, you would also add that during the mixing process too. And if you're following a recipe that uses fresh herbs, but you really only have dried herbs on hand, then a general rule of thumb is to use about 1/3 of the amount of fresh herbs that is called for in the recipe with the dried herbs. So an example of that is if the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary, you would use about 1 teaspoon of dried rosemary for your vegetables. And some really easy herb combinations that we want to leave you with is based upon how the food is grown. So if the food grows above ground, like our bell peppers, our eggplant, our green beans, our broccoli, a good herb combination is going to be oregano and thyme. If the food grows below ground, like our root vegetables being our potatoes, our onions, and our carrots, a good combination for that is going to be rosemary and thyme. And an easy way to remember that combination is thinking of the word root and The R in the word root stands for rosemary, and the T in the word root stands for thyme. So if you're ever wondering, how am I going to season my potatoes or my carrots, think of the word root. R for rosemary, T for thyme. And the last one that we want to leave you with is our squashes. So like our acorn squash, our butternut squash, or our zucchini. Some good herb combinations for that is going to be our rosemary and our sage here. And if you're a big garlic fan and you're wondering where garlic plays in on the flavoring of vegetables, garlic really goes well with all vegetables. So don't hesitate on using garlic in your roasting process because it'll add a lot of good flavor. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that we inspired you to roast some vegetables at home tonight for dinner. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment below, or you can email us.